think I'm recording.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rebel Collective. I am your co-host, Laura Eisenhower.
And I'm your co-host, Drago Reid.
What an incredible guest we have. I am so thrilled that you're here with us today. We have so much to talk about. I've just been watching you and all that you've been sharing over the years, and it's just been so critical to people's awakening and understanding of what's really going on. Drago's going to read the bio, but thank you. Thank you. We have such a special guest today, everybody.
G. Edward Griffin, a pioneering figure whose profound impact spans the realms of authorship, filmmaking, and activism. Born on November 7th, 1931 in Detroit, Michigan, Griffin has dedicated his life to unraveling complex subjects and shedding light on hidden truths. As a prolific author, Griffin has pioneered in the field of investigative journalism, fearlessly delving into topics that challenge mainstream narratives. His groundbreaking work, The Creature from Jekyll Island, stands as a testament to his commitment to unveiling the mysteries and scandals surrounding the Federal Reserve System and the global financial landscape. This monumental book has been held as a cornerstone in understanding the intricacies of central banking and the consequences of monetary policy. Griffin's pioneering spirit extends to the realms of filmmaking, where he has produced documentaries that confronts prevailing paradigms. A World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17, showcases his dedication to exploring alternative perspectives on health and medicine. His ability to present complex information in a simple manner has earned him acclaim as a visionary communicator. Beyond his written and visual contributions, Griffin has established himself as a trailblazer in the field of activism. Through organizations like the Freedom Force International, he has worked tirelessly to promote individual liberty, free markets, and a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world. In a world often resistant to dissenting voices, G. Edward Griffin's pioneering efforts have paved the way for a more informed and discerning public. His legacy as a trailblazer remains a source of inspiration for those who seek to challenge the mainstream media mockingbird narrative and to uncover the hidden realities that shape our societies. I'm going to now hand it over to you, Laura.
Wow. Well, thank you again for being here. I want to, welcome you to the Rebel Collective, Mr. Griffin, and it's an honor to have you here. To begin, could you share with our listeners the pivotal moment or experience that sparked your journey into investigative journalism? What was it that opened your eyes to the corruption and manipulation occurring on a global scale and ultimately inspiring you to pursue the truth and uncover hidden realities?
Well, first of all, thank you for that very kind introduction, Drago. That was very impressive. It doesn't even sound like me, but anyway, I like it. I'm going to have you around doing all my public relations work here in a minute, because I need that kind of thing. But anyway, thank you for that. I'm going to disappoint you, I'm afraid, because there was no pivotal moment. It's like so many things in life, it just creeps up on you, you know? And if I had known where that first step would have taken me, or was taking me, I probably would have not taken it, because back in that day, we're talking about 1959, 1960, that's when I began to learn about some of the realities of the world. I began to learn that it wasn't necessarily so. Everything I thought I knew, went through the public school system, went through the university system at the University of Michigan. Fortunately, I went to the university to have a good time, not to learn too much, because I got fair grades, but I took easy courses, things that I enjoyed. I was joking over breakfast with my wife this morning. One of the hardest courses I took at the university, I thought would be a pushover, was about astronomy. Well, I was fascinated by the topic, I still am, but the bloody professor wanted me to remember the names and the forms of all of those constellations, and I almost flunked the course. But anyway, I'm already digressing. So I didn't have too much to unlearn, let's put it that way, when I finally began to discover what the real world was about. I, like so many people, young guys and gals, I went through the system, graduated, decided it was time to get married, because that's what you do at that time. So I picked the prettiest student nurse on campus, and I married her, and that was a good start. And then the first thing you know, we decided to have some children. That was a good start. But the real horrible thing was that all of a sudden I found that I wasn't just a kid anymore. I was a man, or had to be a man, and I had a wife and a child and another one on the way to take care of. And my whole world perspective changed. So I thought I was going to go into communications. That's what drama and communications is what I signed up for at the university, because all my younger years, I actually was one of those awful things called a child actor. I had been accidentally recruited into a training program in the Detroit public school system, where they train kids if they wanted to learn how to use a microphone, how to be on the radio. We learned about all of the signals, the hand signals, and how to hold a script and how a microphone works. And so all that stuff, I was fascinated by it. And we started off with a couple of hundred kids signed up for it. Very crowded studio that morning when the first session was held. I had to stand in the back of the room. But anyway, the next Saturday came around, and instead of 200 people, there were only 100 kids there. And then the next Saturday, there were only about 50 kids there. And the next Saturday, there was about 25, and then 12. And first thing you know, it was down to about 6 or 7 of us. And we were really the gung-hoers, you know. So we stuck with it. And all of the radio stations in the Detroit area, and there were all of the major networks were there, of course. Anytime they had a show or a commercial, or they needed some young kid to have a voice, you know, hi, Dad, hi, Mom, see you later, kiddo, whatever it is, they would call and see who's available. So the first thing you know, I'm one of these kids being on the radio a lot. I was on the Hermit's Cave and the Ford Theater and the Lone Ranger and programs like that came out of Detroit. So when I went into the university, I thought, well, I'm going to be in the field of communications and drama. I thought I would go to Hollywood and be in the next Cecil B. DeMille, you know. That was my dream and my ambition. So I don't want to take too long with this, but I wanted to impress you with the idea that I didn't do any of the things I thought I was going to do as a kid. And I think that most people in life find that's true. Very few people actually wind up doing what they thought they were going to do, because life keeps throwing roadblocks in your path. And all of a sudden your path has to divert to the left or to the right to get around the obstacle. And in my case, every time there was a roadblock thrown in front of me, in retrospect, no matter how horrible I thought it was at the time, but in retrospect, I discovered it was a very good thing. So this idea that all of a sudden I went to Hollywood after I got out of the military, and I thought I was going to make a big splash, but instead it was a big thud. And so I decided my money was running out, and I had this pretty wife and a couple of kids to support. So I decided to go into the corporate world and get a real job and become responsible for my family. And that was a diversion. It's a good thing, actually, looking in retrospect, because all of the people that I know personally who did stay on that path of trying to break through in Hollywood, you know, get their big moment. The people that I met when I was in Hollywood at that time, trying to do those things, they just hung on there, you know, washing cars and bussing tables, waiting for their big moment. And then the few that got some opportunities wound up in a very corrupt and morally rubberish kind of a system. And I wouldn't have done well in that at all anyway, or it would have destroyed me. So in retrospect, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, that I didn't have any great opportunity to stay in Hollywood. So now I'm in the corporate world, I'm in the insurance business. I'm doing underwriting for a large insurance company and selling and installing group insurance programs for corporations. And my job was to install the programs, design the programs, figure out the premiums, you know, explain to the people and to the corporate managers what the benefits were and all that sort of thing. So it was a good start. I decided I was going to climb to the top of the corporate ladder. So now I'm a corporate guy. And but along about that time, and I was doing very well, by the way, and I thought, oh, this is pretty nice. This is the real world. Make some money and moved to New York and had penthouse and have a limousine. I'll be a vice president of a big company. That was my goal. That was my next goal. Well, then another obstacle fell in my path because I started to read some literature that I picked up in the waiting room of one of the corporations I was servicing. And it was a little booklet called The Free Man, put out by the Foundation for Economic Education in Irvington-on-Hudson, I believe was their location. And it was the first time in my life that I had ever read any articles or anything, any literature of any kind, that advocated what we might call laissez-faire or limited government. Everything I'd been exposed to in school was how wonderful it is to have a good, strong government that can solve all these problems for us. Nothing was ever suggested to me as a student that maybe that was a bad idea, because if they can solve problems for you, they can also make problems for you. If they can give you everything you want, they can take from you everything you have. I didn't see any of that. So I thought that this information in this little magazine was stunning. No, but it didn't turn me around. I thought, this is just a new way of looking at life. So I subscribed to the magazine, and I was so intrigued by it. I collected all the back issues, and I still have them in my library. They're all bound, as a matter of fact, these little articles and essays in The Free Man. And so all of a sudden, I was interested in this field of politics, of ideologies. I was interested in something outside of just myself and my family. I began to think about what goes on in the world, my nation, my community. And I began to discover things that jolted my understanding of the real world. For example, wars. And my first exposure to all of that was running across another little pamphlet that had been written by a college professor in Midwest University. I've forgotten which one, but it was a small one. And I believe the title of it was The Case Against the United Nations. Well, wait a minute, how dare you challenge the United Nations and criticize it? Because I had been through school and I had learned that the UN was, of course, our last best hope for peace. So a college professor was saying that the case against the UN? So I read the booklet, and he made some outrageous statements. He was saying that everything that the UN said it was interested in doing, all the benefits, was really just a cover for the real goal, which was to create a totalitarian world government. And I thought, that's absurd. How could you support that? But I did check out his references. He had, as a professor, he had documented his case very well. And for the first time since I left school, I actually went to the library, and I had some spare time. Otherwise, I doubt if I would have done it. But I went to the library, and I went to the International Affairs Department, and I started to check out some books on the United Nations to see if this guy really had any case. I discovered that he did have a case. So that was now my next big move. Having exposed myself to literature that introduced me to the concept of freedom being based on individual liberty, and that was the path to justice and prosperity and happiness and all of those good things, not the path to collectivism and everybody working as a group, but the individual was the source of everything and not the group. So that was a big step. But then while I was in that step, I always thought of what was happening in America as being the natural process of the decay of an empire. We know the great Roman Empire came up. It was magnificent, it was brutal. It was tyranny, of course, but all empires, I thought, had to be that way to survive and claw their way to the top. It seemed like the United States wouldn't have gone to the top unless it had been victorious in a couple of great wars and so forth. So I thought that was the way the world had to run. But then I discovered that the United Nations, in spite of all of its talk about humanity and brotherhood and peace, actually was an instrument for totalitarianism and war and class distinction and so forth. And so that jolted me, and I realized, oh my gosh, everybody's falling for this. And that was my next big step. It's not a complete turnaround, but I realized that it wasn't just the decline, the natural decay of a great empire. although probably there was some element to that. But I found out that there were groups and individuals, very powerful individuals in those groups, who were trying to hasten the process. It wasn't natural, it was artificial. These people were working to bring it about. They were working to destroy the existing order so that people would be in despair and then turn to government to solve the problems, which were being created by the very people who were offering to solve the problems that they created. So that was my final jolt. I realized, oh my gosh, this is really bigger than I had realized. And I discovered I had, I guess you'd call it a crusader gene, because I decided that I had to do something about this. And it surprised me because I'd never had any instincts like that before. I quit my job in the corporate world and just jumped off into the world of communications. I was back. I said, hey, I'm a communicator, I thought. So maybe I can use the skills I learned in school and in my actual experience. I could make some films, maybe. Maybe I could put on presentations. So I did that, and that was back in about 1962 or 61 that I made that my full-time effort in life. Well, the rest is, you know, the track. I kept learning of more and more horrendous, or taking more and more bitter red pills. I was discovering that almost everything that I believed in, almost everything I thought was true, turned out to not to be so true. It was a cover-up for some kind of a great scam or a racket of some kind. And that process has never stopped. As old as I am, I guess you read my birth date, so you know as of this moment I'm 92 bloody years old, and I'm still learning almost every day that, oh my gosh, they're into that too. That I thought that was, I could depend on that group or that person. I don't know, no, that's controlled opposition. And I used to think maybe I'm getting paranoid or something. But I learned to be a researcher along the way because I knew I was going upstream with all these ideas. And I knew that I would be severely challenged to prove it. So I've made it a point to over-document almost everything that I want to communicate. And so I knew in my heart that what I was saying was not just somebody's opinion, it was based on fact. And most of the facts I've learned to take directly from the source, directly from the people on the other side, who often boast about some of the things that they're doing. They boast about it to their friends, but not to the world. So anyway, and I guess that takes quite a while to cover that, but that really was the short version. I discovered that the Federal Reserve System was not a government agency. It wasn't there to protect us from inflation. It was there to create inflation. I learned that the United Nations was not a great organization for peace and brotherhood, but for tyranny and world government, based on the model of collectivism. I've learned about the health industry not being there to cure people's diseases, but to perpetuate them so that they will need medications, and that's because their business is all about profit. If you cure a disease, you lose your patient, you lose your cash flow. I just say, oh my gosh, the whole medical profession is based on perpetuating disease, not curing disease. And one after the other, the wars we fought in, fighting for freedom and democracy and all these things, I found, no, it wasn't for that at all. It was to empower certain governments and to build the foundation for this United Nations dream of a world government and so forth. So I'm still going through that process now. I learn things almost every day that shock me to the core. And I'm just, my crusader gene is vibrating just as strong as it ever was.
Wow. Huh. Gosh.
Yeah, man. Wow. That sounds freaking amazing. What was your first major clue you discovered that actually led you to believe that this whole one world government, basically that would have contradicted everything you would have believed in as the United States, the founding fathers, the establishment of a free country, free religion, the freedom to do everything. You know, it took 20 years after 1776 before we had to amend our own constitution and produce the Bill of Rights. So our country is founded on rights that cannot be taken away. And with what you discovered that far back, you would have seen the erosion of the Constitution firsthand. Because like I was thinking when you were talking about your story, the internet didn't exist yet. So to find information, to be a researcher in those times, to find that much information that's hidden from the public, I commend you and your efforts, because you would have spent your entire life going down that rabbit hole. And that's why I love how you brand your brand like the red pill, like you do the Red Pill Expo and stuff, because you uncover all these truths and you basically, it's almost like a slap to the face. Like, this is the truth. This is the entire blueprint of how they did it. This is contract here, contract here. This is how they established the United Nations. This is what was enacted during the National Security Act of 1947, Patriot Act 2001, how all that was handed over through Operation Paperclip. Just, you seen the erosion of everything that America stands for. And I just can't imagine how you would have taken that, and how you didn't have a public voice yet. Like I said, the internet didn't exist. And you realize later that your voice is amplified the moment the internet actually comes out, and then boom. And then, it just, information just explodes. So, man.
Gosh.
Well, it was quite a ride. It was what is the word? It's Disney has a phrase for it. It's some kind of a wild ride at Disneyland. I've forgotten what it is, but anyway, it's been a wild ride. And fortunately, I didn't have the whole picture dumped on me or shown to me at once, or I might not have been able to take it. I think God was kind by allowing me to see it a little bit at a time. Otherwise, I might have given up at the beginning. I said, there's no way that I'm going to change any of this. But I've learned a lot along the way. I remember early in this ball game, if you want to call it that, I was in several organizations. I joined all the organizations. I've worked in some of them. And at the head of all these organizations, there was usually some older person. By older, I mean a lot younger than I am now, but remember, I'm in my 20s and 30s, so anybody who's 45 and up is over the hill. So I would look at people 45, 55, 60 years of age in these leadership positions in these movements, and the message from them was pretty discouraging. They were saying, don't be in a hurry, young guy. I mean, look, you're not going to change this overnight. This is a long generational battle we're in, And I kept thinking to myself, oh yeah, that's what you think. No, I am in a hurry. By God, I'm going to get it over by the next election. We can change the election. We can turn this thing around, and I can go back to playing my games. Well, now here I am saying, wait a minute, slow down. We're not going to change this overnight. Certainly not by the next election. But the important thing is we can change it if we have the long view of history. Because maybe we'll talk a little bit later about that interview with Yuri Bezmenov, the Soviet defector he was a member of the KGB. And one of his strongest messages was that you take over a nation in the modern way, not with guns and bayonets, bombs and things like that. That's old style war. You take it over by capturing the minds of the citizens. It's psychological war now. And with the technology and the knowledge we have of psychology, it's much easier than most people realize to change the attitudes of an entire nation. And Bezmenov pointed out that the strategy that the Soviets had developed for the conquest of any nation was first to capture the school system and the educational system, so you could begin to twist the minds of the young students and prepare them to receive only information that would allow them to consider the proposition of global government based on the model of collectivism. And then as long as the students think that's the right thing to do, because of whatever reason, fill in the blank, well, because we want to put an end to war, we want to put an end to disease, we certainly want to stop terrorism, all of the good things, and every one of those good things requires giving up a little bit of your liberty and sending more money to the government, and making them stronger. And people can be convinced, yeah, well, it's for the greater good of the greater number. And that's how they decided to do it. And it works. That's the amazing thing. And Yuri Bezmenov made it so clear that if they could control what students learn for one or two generations for sure, they've got the country, because those kids are going to grow up and they'll be the next leaders. And that's what we're living in that world right now. Our leaders were the kids. that were convinced of collectivism being the ideal, and even in some way to hate America. They hate the productive system that we had that made everybody so prosperous and so free. They say, well, that's bad. We can't have that anymore. As long as I have the money and the ability and the limousines and all the airplanes and so forth, but the people, we can't allow that to happen because it'll ruin the climate or something, you know. And I'm going on, rattling on too much. But yes, I saw all of this evolve, and the fortunate thing is I didn't see it all at once because I might have been discouraged. But I do know how to turn it around, I think, even at this late date. Now, I might, if I may, I don't want to dominate this because I want to hear your reactions to some of the things I say, but one of the things I want to cover before we are through with this is this: there's an idea behind all of this. This isn't just strategy. The strategy that Yuri Bezmenov was talking about was how to win a war through psychological means, primarily. And one of the stages is, what is it, some moral demobilization. I've got a funny word for it, or something like that. And he's talking about imbuing students, and older people too, but mostly students, with an idea that if you buy into the idea, then everything else falls into place. And I didn't realize that. I should back up a little bit and tell you that during the time when I was learning about all of this, and I was still in the corporate world, our main office was downtown in Los Angeles. And one day I had an appointment, and I had it like an hour and a half or more. I just had to fill it in. So I decided to stop in at the communist bookstore, which I had driven by a couple of times, and I knew where it was. It was called the People's Bookshop down on Larchmont Street in Los Angeles, pretty close to the center of downtown. And I decided to drop in and see what's going on there because I was curious about this thing called communism. It was taking over the world. How come? Every place communism came to power, there were massive killings, there was genocide going on, the economy collapsed, there was a dictatorship that evolved, people were miserable and horrible, in many cases just murdered because they opposed the government. How is it that these young people are going for it when the record already even then was clear that once you get it, you don't like it? And so I thought, I want to see how this works. So I went down to the People's Bookshop, and I started to hang out down there with the comrades. I bought many, if not most of I bought all of their key books on what they believed in. I mean, Karl Marx's Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto were the starting point, of course. But there was a collection of works by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, which was really the source of most of the information that I found startling, and others too. And I started to read the works of Mao Zedong and Castro and all the well-known leaders of communism. And I discovered what they believe in, and I discovered what the flaws were, at least. The flaws were obvious once you change the language. They succeed because they're masters of language. For example, I'll give you an example. One of the more prominent slogans of communism is, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Okay? That's the basis of socialism / communism, and it comes from Karl Marx. And so what's wrong with that? Well, isn't that good? You see? Isn't that good? Isn't that the basis of Christian charity, that you give according to your ability and to those, hopefully, that need it the most? What's wrong with that? Well, the fact is there's nothing wrong with that, but it's only half of a statement. Oh, what's the other half? Well, the other half that nobody thinks about is, how are you going to do this? Are you going to do it in an environment where you're free to act and you're trying to convince people to do it? Or are you going to come in with a gun or a bayonet or something and say, you will give according to your ability, as we say your ability is, and you will give it to the people who deserve it the most, and we will decide who deserves it the most? Now that's a little different story. When you put the other half of the equation on it, nobody would buy into it. So, but nobody ever puts those two pieces together. So the communists get by giving you half of a truth and don't hide, they don't reveal to you, they hide the other half of the truth, which turns out to be something very, very unpleasant. So that's just an example, but the whole mantra of communism is based on good slogans, peace, prosperity, an end to exploitation, end of racism, end of wars, and so forth. Well, what's wrong with any of those things? There's nothing wrong with their slogans. It's the fact that in order to achieve these things that they talk about, it's one little detail. In order to achieve these things as they see it, that we want to be done, we have to own you. We have to take away your property and your freedom, and you have to obey us in every way, and then we'll do all these good things. Well, nobody's willing to pay that price if they really knew what the price was. And besides, they can't do those things anyway, especially that. But anyway, those are the things I learned, and the reason I'm telling you this is because I got deep into it, and I said, aha, I'm beginning to wake up to some of these methods that the opposition uses to capture the minds, especially of young people who don't know anything about history yet. And that's why they want to get history out of the schools, so you don't ever learn about history. But as long as you don't really know the track record of these ideas, they sound good. And if you don't have the capacity to think it through and do some real introspection on it and comparison with reality, you'll just go for it until you find out that you are on the wall and you're standing in front of a firing squad because you own too much property or something like that. So anyway, I learned all that, and I made notes as to all these things, these elements that showed up in the communist motivation list, I would call it. What motivates people to buy into it? And then I got curious, and this is where I'm really going with this. I got curious about this idea of what's the opposite of communism? So if communism is this, then, and it's so bad in my mind, what's on the other side that would be good? And I was horrified to realize that in the context in which we live today, since communism, we are told, is on the extreme left, the opposite is on the extreme right. And that's fascism and Nazism. So according to the implied mantra at the time, if you want to oppose communism, you've got to be a Nazi or a fascist. What? And that we have that same situation today. If you're not on the left, well, you must be on the right, you see. And those are the only two options which the media and the school system give you. And of course, then I began to find out, well, okay, I thought I was a right-winger because I didn't like the left-wingers. And I actually, for a period, called myself a right-winger. But I'm not a fascist or a Nazi. Let me find out now about the fascists and the Nazis. So there was no fascist or Nazi bookstore in town, but I did find their books, and I bought the works of Mussolini, did some writing, and of course Adolf Hitler. I got his Mein Kampf. And I really devoured Mein Kampf in detail, and I started making notes on that too. And to my amazement, I discovered that everything, every item, every ideological point that Karl Marx and Lenin were advocating was advocated by Adolf Hitler too. They were not opposites at all. They were identical twins, but they were fighting. They appeared to fight each other, yes. They were at war with each other. They slaughtered each other by the tens of thousands, maybe millions of people in a world war, communism against Nazism. But what were they fighting over? Not their belief systems. They were fighting over territory. They were fighting over who's going to win, who's going to control the world, you or me. It's me, I'm going to fight. I'm going to beat you. And that's the only difference between communism and Nazism and fascism. And that came as a big jolt. So I walked out of that with an understanding of the world that I never had before. And certainly you're not going to find that understanding taught in the classrooms today. Even today, we're told in the political world, you're either a Democrat or a Republican, right? You're either a right-winger or a left-winger, right? Can't you be something not as bad as that on either side? And that's when I discovered that there's something beneath all of this. And it it's a word that describes the ideology that's common to both the left and the right. And that ideology is called collectivism. It's the only word out there that makes any sense in this political debate. This business of whether you're a right-winger, a left-winger, Republican, Democrat, a moderate, a liberal, a conservative, all those words are garbage. They don't tell you anything except little pieces of information. And people use them because they don't know that there are other words that really have meaning. And so I've made it kind of a career objective of mine is to reintroduce into the English language these words, collectivism versus individualism. And those words you'll find commonly used in the old books, but they were deliberately removed from the vocabulary by our own leaders and leaders around the world, starting with World War I. By the end of World War II, we had fought a war for democracy, which is another form of collectivism when you look at it. I'll come back to that maybe. And we lost the war of words and vocabulary. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we take a look at our situation today, everything that's happening, all of the things that I learned about, the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor, for example, wasn't a surprise attack at all. The American side, FDR and his lieutenants and the people at the military understood the Japanese were going to attack the United States, and they were encouraging them to do so. They wanted them to do so. And we even wound up at the end of this research project with the papers from the Pentagon itself describing their strategy to entice Japanese into the war. I mean, they were already in a war, but to entice them to attack the United States so that we could pretend to be the victim. And that as a victim, then we could get into the war we wanted to get into anyway, because we wanted to be at the table, the peace table at the end of the war, to create a one world government based on the model of collectivism. And we're back to the UN again. There was an ideology behind all of these things. And it was this thing, they wanted to build a world based on the model of collectivism. And they used the words at that time. Well, now you don't hardly ever hear that word, but I'm trying to bring them back into understanding. And you'll find at the basis of everything that's troubling us today is the ideology of collectivism. And I'll just to round this out so I don't leave you hanging on it, there are a couple of central concepts that I wrote down in these books, both Marx and Hitler. And one of them is, the primary one, the one that you'd recognize, is that the group is more important than the individual, and that the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. You'll find that's true in all these totalitarian systems in the world, all of them. And it's certainly true in Marxism and fascism. And there you have it right there. As long as you can claim that you are doing something really quite bad because it's for the greater good, you get away with it. People believe it if you keep saying it and saying it and saying it, and they hear it coming from every direction. So why are we taking all these killer vaccines, for example? Well, it's for the greater good of society. Otherwise, the people will die from COVID, you see. And you don't worry about it, but grandma might die of something. Why did FDR deliberately sacrifice the lives of 4,000 U.S. sailors at Pearl Harbor so we could get into the war? I think it was Titinius that wrote his diaries, or one of those fellows wrote their diaries. I had to check it out after the war. And in it, it says, well, we did set up, he admitted it in his own diaries, we did set up the Japanese to attack Pearl Harbor, and we did withhold information from our commanders at Pearl Harbor so that they wouldn't be prepared. We did take the ships, the more modern ships, out of there and steam them away so they couldn't be used in battle. And we did withhold information. We wanted that attack. And then he said, it was an act of great statesmanship on the part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because it got us into a war earlier than we would have otherwise. And by so doing, we saved lives. It was for the greater good. And in the long term, it was for the greater good to get America into international affairs. We were too too private. We wanted to become involved in the world now. And the only way to do it is to be attacked and be a victim rather than an aggressor. Every time you take a look at 9/11, it's coming out finally, and sooner or later it'll be out. They'll say, well, yeah, it was an inside job, but all those people will be dead by then, so nobody will have to take any responsibility for it. But future historians will say, if they're collectivist historians, they will say, well, yeah, wasn't that an act of great statesmanship? Yeah, it was a terrible thing, all those poor people that were killed in that event, and all the destruction and all the things that happened afterwards. But if that hadn't happened, why, we might have been what? I don't know, fallen victim to international terrorist movement or something like that. There's always some explanations for the greater good for America. So now, having said that, I will just finish off. I'm working on another book. I've been working on it, I'm embarrassed to tell you, since the day after 9/11, okay, I guess I make it 9/12, I wrote my first 5 pages on what is a book I'm still working on, and that's the embarrassing part. I seem to can't get to it. And the main thing that I wanted to show in this book, and still will, is that 9/11 was one of these things that was for the greater good of the greater number, supposedly, to be a victim, to be attacked, so that we could do what we wanted to do as aggressors, but appear to be defending ourselves as, victims. Same thing that's going on right now in the Middle East. Same strategies. You want to appear as a victim so that you can be aggressive and everybody will applaud you for it rather than condemn you for it. It's an old strategy. Well, anyway, I wanted to illustrate that all these things that happen, the idea of collectivism really is behind it all. And while I'm so slow in the process and things are moving so rapidly, I thought, well, why don't I just take my notes? I'm about 70 or 80% done with the book, but it's still not done. So why don't I just take my notes on the hardcore message of collectivism versus individualism and put them together in a little document and just throw it out there, see if anybody wants it. I'll give it away free. And so that's what I did about 2 or 3 months ago. I went to my notes and my manuscript. I took all the stuff that's sprinkled around in the book and put it together in a 50-page document. And I called it the chasm. And so that's the collectivism versus individualism. And this is what it looks like, the chasm. And it's 50 pages. And the whole argument that I was talking about, what are all those points of collectivism and their answers? As I say their answers, I mean their rebuttals are all in here as well. If the world doesn't understand that our battle is a psychological battle, and that we are losing it not because of superior weaponry, because we've got the weapons, but the danger is not from out there attacking us here. The danger is from within. People within, our own leaders, our students becoming the leaders of tomorrow. The strategy that Marx laid down was brilliant. Take over a country from the inside, not attack it from the outside.
Eisenhower and Reagan said that as well.
Yes. And so to do that, you have to have an ideology to sell everything to the young minds and to the old folks as well that never thought about this. And that strategy is to sell them an ideology called collectivism as being for the greater good of the greater number. And all that, until we understand that, we will lose this war. And it won't be a pretty picture. So I put it together in this document, and I wanted to get this in here. If anybody wants this document, it's free, it's a download. Just go to Chasm, that's CHASM, Great Divide. You see a picture here that looks like the Grand Canyon, only a bigger, deeper. And that's a huge, huge chasm to be sure. Anyway, chasm.realityzone.com. That's chasm.realityzone.com. And you'll be able to get a download on this if you wish. I hope you do. I hope you make copies of it and send them around, because it's the key to victory. And if we don't have that key, we will lose.
I'm ready to get boxes and boxes and stand on the corner of Costco, Walmart.
Well, that's what it's going to take. All the strategies in the world won't work unless you've got an ideology. We have to know what we're for as well as what we're against. And that's been a huge, huge vacuum.
So you were in Plandemic 3, and that was some footage from quite a while back. I mean, you've been saying this for, so long. What results have you seen, and how did the Plandemic, I mean, it seemed everybody was groomed along the way for this big sort of event that has been reverberating into the future of these concepts of collectivism, right? I mean,
Yes.
there are multiple factors involved in all this. Where do you feel the breakthrough lies with people? Does it really have to hit home first, or it seems with your level of expertise and intelligence that this is basic common sense? I mean, what results have you seen since you've been speaking out? Have you seen a lot of people you wouldn't expect to shift even in the here and now with the pandemic post all of this? I mean, yeah, it was amazing footage. I mean, like friends and family that might have gone down this road, have they been open-minded, or have you found yourself needing to just move forward and let that go?
Well, it depends. It's a little bit of both, I suppose, which is okay. We don't need everybody. And that's, I'll start the answer to your question with that observation that in the early days, I thought, oh, what a hopeless battle this is. Everybody's brainwashed, or they're numbed, their brains have been anesthetized. They just don't care, and things like that. And then I gradually realized that history has always been written by the smallest groups you can imagine. Less than 1% of the population has always determined the course of history. And it works, as I see it, this is my understanding of it, it works something like this. There's 1% or less, sometimes very much less, half of 1%, tenth of 1% of the people who are what you might call the originators, the people with the ideas. We have a modern word for it. I've forgotten what it is. But anyway, they're the leaders, the thought leaders, and they're the ones that write the books and stimulate the minds, set the fire to the grass fire to the mind is one way to put it, and that ignites the fire in 3% of the population who are really gung-ho, all out, let me at 'em type of people. These are the influencers. I would definitely put you two in that category. I mean, you are an influencer. You're not just sitting home talking about these things. You're out doing what you can. You've got this podcast going. I'm sure you're doing a lot more that I would never even dream about. And constantly talking to your friends and strangers. And you've got plans, and you probably have participated in movements. You support everybody you can. I'm just guessing, but that's the way the 3% works. And then the 3% who are the influencers influence a total group, when you put all of it together, of 15%. And those are the people who say, yeah, count me in. Now, they're not scholars. They're not maybe able to do as much work and dedicate as much of their lives to the battle as the 3%. They're too busy raising a family and all that sort of thing. But they're solid people. They understand what the problem is, and they can be counted on when you need them. Now, that 15% historically always has changed the world. As I see it, in many of these battles, there are 15% at each end of the spectrum. And everybody in the middle, the 70%, they have no idea. The old saying is there are three kinds of people: those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who have no idea that anything's happening at all. And that would be the 70%. They don't know what's going on. They're confused, and they really don't have a stomach for learning about it. They don't want to know about it. It's too uncomfortable. And that's the way it's always been. In the American Revolution, that's the way it was. The patriots in the American colonies, the ones that participated in the rebellion and the revolution, 15%, led by 3%. And you look deeper and you'll find that it's about 1% led the 3%. And the other 15% on the other side were the loyalists, and most of those skipped out to Canada because they didn't want to be responsible. And the other 70% in the middle said, yeah, well, we'll just see which way it goes. And if the royalists win, well, we'll say we were always on your side. And that's the way it works. So I'm not concerned about those numbers. I think we already have, compared to where I started years ago, I think right now we have more than 15% of the population who already understand enough of it. They're ready to do what they can. They're just waiting for leadership. And that's the trick. Our enemies don't allow leadership because our enemies provide our leadership. They provide our leadership. They knew long ago that there would be revolt against this, and they said, well, we're not going to wait around for that to happen. We're going to send our agents into the field posing as opposition to us. They'll be our people, but they'll be controlled opposition. They'll actually do some good. They'll say the right things. They'll hold up the Constitution. They'll expose some secrets that are already being exposed, and they'll do everything to make them look like they're the real thing, but deep down in their hearts, they're on the other side. And their mission is to lead us over the cliff because we trust them. They sound so good and look so good. So that's what we're up against. We have the 15%, and our leadership is being denied to us. We're being offered false leaders in many cases. Now, don't ask me to tell you which ones they are because I don't know for certain. I have suspicions, but I don't really know. But I think it's important for us to recognize that they're there. We just have to be cautious about these things and be smart so that we don't step into that trap. All right, having said that, what do I see that's different? I see that people are waking up now by huge numbers. They know something's wrong. They don't trust the official narratives at all. I think with all of the damage, the health damage that's been done by the vaccine hoax, the fraud, and people are seeing through it now. Even those who were solid supporters of the vaccines are seeing members of their family, in some cases their children, falling dead. And this is something they're not overlooking. The tide is turning. People are questioning authority now on almost everything. But the problem still remains. They don't have leadership, and they don't know that they are in the majority, or close enough to the majority. They don't know that they're in the controlling 15%. A lot of people on our side still think they're all alone. They think the world's gone crazy. They think they're alone. Our job is to introduce ourselves to each other, to form into working groups, and to push back in an organized fashion. We could do it if we could just get together. So I'm encouraged by the fact that there are more and more people coming into that 15% category. I think we're probably closer to 20% now. But I'm concerned over the fact that most of them still don't understand. They don't understand what to do about it. And in many cases, they might be tempted to follow a false leader and do the wrong thing. Now, that's a very dangerous thing to say because somebody might say, well, Griffin is just trying to convince everybody not to follow a leader. And therefore, Griffin is the guy that's trying to kibosh the movement. Well, I'm not that kind of a guy at all. I'm saying when we choose a leader, we have to look not at what he says or what she says. Forget the words. I wouldn't trust anything any politician says, any of them, not even the ones I like. I don't trust anything any politician says. Look at their record, not their words. That's how you can tell which are the genuine ones. And the record should go back quite a distance. And get your prejudices out of your mind, your favorites, just because somebody smiles nicely or says the right things. Oh, we got to restore the Constitution. We've got to put our wall back up on the border. Oh, we got to save our monetary system. Oh, those bad bankers, we got to do something about them. Forget the words, forget those words. They talk about it, but they don't do it when they get into office. Look at their record, and that's how you tell who is controlled up and who is not. But to answer your question, I think we have about 18 to 20% of the population who's ready right now to turn this thing around if we could just get them together. And that's what I'm devoting my life to right now through the Red Pill Project. We have the Red Pill Expo, the Red Pill University, and we're rapidly trying to install Red Pill campuses, local groups in every county in the United States.
It's incredible.
I was just thinking it would be amazing if we can, me and Laura, ever talk to your Red Pill Expo. You have amazing lineup of speakers and whistleblowers and insiders and stuff like that. So like, We can never do that down the road. To segue back when you was talking about, it was your work talking about the small amount of elites in your book, Creature from Jekyll Island, which basically talks about how they eliminated bloodline families. Rothschilds were involved, which is basically the Farnese family, and how they wrote all this illegal legislation. And I think it was December of 1913, they created the Federal Reserve. And that was one of their main funding mechanisms to help take over all this. Now, you mentioned that collectivism. I basically came to the conclusion that that was the number one funding mechanism for the entire military industrial complex. You have the Federal Reserve printing all the money, and then that funds World War II, it funds Pearl Harbor, basically all these false flags. And you wrote that about that in that book. And earlier you were talking about content creators and the power behind social media influencers. And that's what Klaus Schwab just did. When he created the World Economic Forum, he created something called the Global Shapers Community. And his quote is, as a means, as a force to shape our common future. In doing so, he created the Young Global Leaders Group, which is basically the who's who of big tech, big pharma, military, royal families, you name it. And just to name a couple of examples of these major people, these major influencers that people would look up to, we have the global head of BlackRock, chair in law, UCA Law School, CEO of TikTok, the head of global public policy for PayPal, Deputy Secretary General of Council of Ministers of Europe, the Minister of Economy and Planning of Saudi Arabia, the Director General Office of the Prime Minister of Bahrain, Managing Director of Merrill Lynch, advisors with the U.S. Department of Energy, AI CEOs, United States governors, research scientists at Google, heads of the Jesuits, heads of central banks, directors of Saudi Arabian oil companies. It goes on and on and on. And it's basically a collection of globalists. They basically want to take all the power from the people, and they want to collectively take all that power and just eliminate the middle class. They want it to be the elites versus everybody else. When you were talking about them bringing in the one world government, that's been prophesied as far back as the Sumerian tablets. There was a Sumerian tablet called Enki and the World Order. And in that tablet, it starts talking about the blueprints and the prototype of how they've done this throughout time. They've done this. They did it in Egypt. They did it in Atlantis. They did it in everywhere. And they in this blueprint that they install, it never lasts. It rises, then it falls. It's kind of like you can predict the economy. Every single nation that's ever rose by a totalitarian means, it fell epically. And the people started rising in the hundreds of millions. Like this whole Great Reset, it's like it's all the world governments all reading the same script through Operation Mockingbird. It's all coming from Switzerland. They want China, a communist country, the world's leading superpower, the United States. You know, they want to find the carbon footprint of every corporation, animal, and human being on the planet. Like when they want to eliminate carbon, that's a human being. We are carbon. To eliminate or find carbon dioxide, are you crazy? What do you think plants eat? They eat carbon dioxide. You starve the planet of carbon dioxide, we start having mass starvation, crop failures, one after another. They want a complete takeover of AI, no private property, the whole new world. I'm just getting overwhelmed in everything with the reset. They want everything to be a digital currency. They want digital IDs for freaking implants, social credit scores. It just goes on and on and on with Klaus Schwab. And you talk a lot about Klaus Schwab. So we can go down that rabbit hole and I'll just shut up.
Well, no, that's a great rabbit hole. That is the rabbit hole. And yeah, you covered that very well. I have another reason to have you follow me around here, so you can sort of inform my audiences and get them up to speed and ready to hear what I have to say.
I have a feeling we're going to be doing business together.
No, that was an excellent summary, Drago, and you've obviously done your homework. I think your comment about Enki and being a Sumerian strategy, I wasn't aware of that part. If you could send me the reference, I'd like to get that clay tablet or whatever it is where that story comes from, because that's taking it back to the very beginning. Sumerian civilization is the very first one on the planet, as far as we know. So that would be very interesting.
I would say I'm what I study the most for my number one topic of study on this planet is the Anunnaki. I've been studying that subject for the last 20 years, and some of the lectures that I'm going to be giving this year, it involves the history and the timelines of when they arrived, how it all happened, when we were modified 200,000 years ago, how that goes and filters down into Egypt because of the direct descendants of the Anunnaki, like the Rothschilds, Rockefeller family, the Farnese family. In their autobiographies, they admit that they are the direct descendants of the pharaohs of Egypt, which are the direct descendants of the Anunnaki. So with that premise, that's how you get the whole connection to King John Lackland, and then starting the United States through the Jesuits and like the Adam Weishaupt and all that stuff. It's just like so many freaking rabbit holes to go down, man. It's just mind blowing, man.
Yes, it is. Well, you're going through it, and that's what I went through most of my life, still am to a large extent. But I think that I have to say something, not to discourage you or anybody else from being optimistic, but the fact that so far in history, these totalitarian regimes have never been able to sustain themselves is because they were simply outnumbered. And so far in history, the only way to control the unhappy masses is to have superior arms. That means soldiers. They sometimes call them the enforcers. And usually there's that tiny 1% or less that is at the top of that all-seeing eye pyramid. And then there's the middle management, and then there are the enforcers. And then at the bottom of the pyramid is all the people that do all the grunt work. And they're the ones that have to be controlled. So the only way to control them is to have enough enforcers with superior weapons. And that's why it's always failed, because there were just too many people. You could have a lot of soldiers, but not that many. And they each all had either a sword or a rifle. But now, and I'm coming to that, one 19-year-old kid sitting in a uniform in a trailer someplace in Colorado can dispatch a drone in the Middle East and kill, hundreds or thousands of people and not be at risk himself. So the weaponry now, because of technology, has given a lot of power to smaller numbers. That's all I'm trying to say. It's a reality. I don't think it's enough to overcome all of the masses. Maybe we're going to have more than 15% on our side. Maybe it'll be 20 or 25%. I don't know, but the numbers are all we have. We don't have the weaponry, but numbers we have. We have something else, and that's determination. We have spirit. We have heart. Even though these conquerors, or these would-be conquerors, are terribly powerful, I believe in their hearts they're cowards. And as long as they've got the enforcers around them to take care of all of the dirty work, they're very rough and tough. But if they think that they're at personal risk, that changes everything. And I think a lot of the rats would probably jump ship if they thought they were going to be caught on a sinking ship. So it's our hope. I don't have the answers, I know, but I do know that we can't win without mobilizing the people that are waking up. They're waking up. I think the world events are responsible for that. In other words, the words and deeds, not the words, but the deeds of our enemy are working now against them because they're waking up their potential victims. Our job now is primarily to mobilize the people who are awake and to just get these people out of their positions of authority. I'm not talking about killing them or anything like that, but they are in positions of authority. They're in government. And if we control local governments, I know we can put people on the board of supervisors at the county level. We can put people on the board of education. We can make sure our sheriffs are constitutional sheriffs. We can do a lot of things at the local level and build this movement from the bottom up, not from the top down. It will not work that way, but it will work and can work from the bottom up.
Yes, definitely. And it seems there's going to be breakthroughs in how to turn around the assaults and the impact of the bioweapons, that we don't want that to divide us no matter what.
Right.
be
Right.
resources to those that are going to maybe wake up the hard way, that are going to need the support to override a lot of what's taking place. Would you say the biggest weapon is on the mind, though? And once the mind is free, there's so much we can overcome, because it really is based in like frequency and belief systems. And I mean, it's an inverted parasitic system that requires the power of the people to use to battery up, even these false timelines. They wouldn't stand on their own unless they were able to somehow rob the dreams and better judgment of the citizens, right? So once a person's free of that, do you feel that we have the power to overcome a lot of these assaults on every level?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think not only do we see it in our human experience, we see it all throughout the animal kingdom. Um, there's a wonderful book, I can't remember the author's name at the moment, but it had a profound effect on me. It was called The Territorial Imperative. And this is I guess you call him a biologist, probably not. Anyway, he studies the animal kingdom. And he's one of these types of guys that go out into the African desert or into the jungles and live out there quietly under a bush with his camera to observe how the animals are working. Stay out there for a year or two taking notes. He was one of those guys. And in this book, The Territorial Imperative, he was reporting his results of a multi-year study of the fact that all of the upper level animals, especially all of the mammals, and some of those at sub-levels as well, have a built-in territorial instinct. And they have a desire to have property. And he doesn't think that the humans are any different. And one of the reason I'm mentioning this is because he gave an interesting couple of pages to the fact that most species will have more courage in fighting to the defense of their territory than in attacking or trying to steal it. Practically all of them will try and steal it, but when they're confronted with the owners, so-called, of the property, the inhabitants of the property, they run because they know by instinct that those who are defending are more fierce fighters than those who are attacking, in most cases. We're back to weaponry again, perhaps. But I took that to heart, and suddenly, for the first time, I was able to understand why I see so many ground squirrels running across the road as I drive down the road, especially through the country. If you've ever noticed that you're driving down maybe 30 or 35 miles an hour, and these little squirrels are running from the left side to the right side, and then from the right side to the left side, right in front of your car. I mean, they're endangering themselves. They're putting themselves in the path of a moving vehicle. And you think, wasn't that the most stupid thing in the world? No, the truth is they're afraid of being caught away from home. They're on the wrong side of the road. They should have stayed back there, and something's coming, and they feel endangered, and they get cowardly, and they go back home at all costs. And so I realized that people will fight for their liberty and their freedom and their family and their home and their property much more fiercely and last much longer and do much more than those who are doing it for pay or for reward. So when you think that our opposition has so much power, so much money especially, I mean, they've got all the money, they make the bloody stuff. You think, how can you beat that? Well, I think they would give anything to have people like us on their side, that they didn't have to bribe or blackmail or threaten in some way or brainwash. If they just had people on their side who really were true believers. Now, they do have a few, but many of them defect after they see the way it's going. I think we have an asset in that tradition that they wish they had. And I think that's probably how we're going to beat them.
Incredible.
I'm actually seeing that play out throughout the entire world stage. When you were talking earlier about the type of weaponry they use, like bribes, blackmail, brainwashing, I was thinking it's more fifth generation warfare now.
Yes.
Meaning that the new battlefield, I believe, is going to be the digital battlefield. You're going to have AI, quantum computing machines predicting real live moments for the generals to tell them where to move their armies and how to exploit due to scans from satellite images. So I believe the future is machines telling humans how to act, because humans, they have this moral kind of, it's like a pause. Pausing prevents action. And when you're in the field, that can get a lot of people killed. Again, it's basically, we're just handing over control of the AI to make decisions. And I think that's very dangerous, because the World Economic Forum, they started unveiling the DARPA dogs, and like the different mechanisms that the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, all these machines that they're making, they're meant to demobilize the public, and they're predicting that the people are going to be rising, because we've seen, I don't know how many regime changes. I've seen hundreds of millions of people rising against their governments due to corruption and bribery and all this stuff. Just for anti-corruption and crimes against humanity, we had President Sargsyan of Armenia got taken down in 2018. We had President Perez of Guatemala resign, President Zuma of South Africa, the president of Ukraine, the president of Peru. It just goes on and on. And like, I think it's been around since 2015. We've had this worldwide uncovering of crimes. And I think around 2015 is where the website resignation.info went live. And since then, I think there's around 14,800 public resignations around the world. And then suddenly the Me Too campaign happened. So you have the Prime Minister of Malaysia, the President of South Korea, President of Brazil, Prime Minister of Romania. Everybody's getting taken down one after another. You have all this resistance happening with the European Union farmers, the Canadian truckers.